Hi Kipsters, Mr. Hedden again for Escalante Workbook Lesson 5. This lesson is called Using Proportions and Percents, and basically it's word problems, and we're going to use the word problem to set up a proportion, and then we're going to use cross multiplication to get the answer. So we've already been doing this a little bit, so let's practice. Also in these, some of the problems are percents, some of the numbers are percents. So you'll just have to remember to represent the percent as a fraction out of 100. So let's look at our first example. So the first thing you want to do, of course, is read the question. So it says Mark answered 3 out of 5 questions correct. So that's his initial ratio, 3 out of 5. At this rate, how many correct answers did Mark have if the test had 25 questions? So the first thing I like to do is always set up a ratio using words. So we're comparing the correct answers to the total questions. So on the test, his ratio was 3 correct out of 5 total. And that's going to be equal to the total test. So it says how many correct answers if the test had 25 questions. So 25 is the total questions, so it's going to represent the denominator of our second fraction, and we're going to use a variable to represent the unknown value. So now once we set it up, we can just use cross multiplication to solve it like we have been. So we're going to do 3 times 25 equals, we're going to multiply our other two numbers, 5 times x. So 3 times 25 is 75, and that equals 5 times x, which is 5x. Our last step, we're going to solve it by dividing both sides by 5. And x is going to be 15. So Mark got 15 correct answers. All right, so that's our next example. And I'm just on the first page, page 33. Mark received a 75% on his test. So 75% if the test had 35 questions. So percent is going to be out of 100. And we know once again, we're comparing the correct answers to the total answers. So 75% means 75 out of 100 total. And if the test had 35 questions, once again, we know that's going to go on the denominator. And we're going to use x to represent our unknown value. So once again, we're going to cross multiply. Our two values, we're going to multiply them together. So 100x equals 75 times 35, which is 2,625. So to solve it, I'm going to divide both sides by 100, and x equals 26.25. So maybe he got half credit or 1/4 credit on one question. He got 26.25 questions correct. All right, let's go to our next examples, page 34. And this problem says Michael bought 3 shirts for $17. At this rate, how much would he pay for 12 shirts? So let's start out once again with the two things we're comparing. We're comparing shirts with dollars. So the original ratio in the problem, we said 3 shirts with $17. At that rate, how much would he pay for 12 shirts? So the 12, is that the numerator or the denominator? You see shirts is on top, so in this case the 12 is going to be our numerator, and we're going to use a variable for our denominator. Once again, whenever we have two fractions that are equal to each other, called a proportion, we can solve it using cross multiplication. So multiplying diagonal to set up my equation, 3 times x equals 12 times 17. So 3 times x, which is 3x, and 12 times 17, which is 204. And my last step is a one-step equation. Whenever I'm multiplying, the opposite of multiplying is dividing, so I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. And I'm going to get x equals 68. So the final answer, how much would he pay? $68 Michael would pay. And there's different ways to solve this. You could also just multiply by 4 on top and bottom to make it equal ratio. Okay, a couple more examples. One more on page 34. Jamie is traveling to Mammoth at 65 miles per hour. Okay, so 65 miles per hour. At this rate, how long will it take Jamie to reach Mammoth if Mammoth is 325 miles away? So the thing about this is this kind of involves unit rates. So let's break it down. When we say 65 miles per hour, we're comparing miles and hours. And per, the P for per means 1. So 65 miles per hour means 65 miles in 1 hour. So that's my original ratio. And that equals our other ratio. How long will it take if it's 325 miles away? So miles is in our numerator. So we're going to put that on top, 325. How long will it take is our question, so we're going to use x for hours. Once again, we're going to solve it doing what? That's correct, cross multiplication. Good job, class. So we're going to multiply 65 times x. That's 65x. 325 times 1 is just 325. Our last step, since we're doing 65 times x, the opposite of multiplying is dividing by 65 on both sides. 65 cancels out and x equals 5. So 5 what? 5 hours, 5 mammoths, 5 miles. The question was how long? The x was in the place of the hours, so our final answer is 5 hours. All right, let's look at our last couple examples on page 36. So we're going to use the same strategy that we've been using. So let's read the question. A container has 670 milliliters of a solution of water and acid. 3% is acid. How many milliliters are acid? So in this problem, what two things are we comparing? We're comparing the acid to the total liquid, the total solution. So the first number it tells us is 3%. Even though that's only one number, we can actually make that a fraction, right? We know that that means there's 3 out of 100 milliliters would be acid. If the container has 670 milliliters, is that 670 milliliters of acid or 670 total? We know it's 670 total. And once again, we're going to use a variable to represent our unknown value. So once we set up our proportion, we can cross multiply. 3 times 670. Cross multiply 100 times x. So we're just going to simplify. 3 times 670 is 2010. And that equals 100 times x, which is 100x. And our last step is to solve it by dividing by 100 on both sides. So 20.1 equals x. So our final answer is 20 1/10 milliliters of acid. Okay. Our last example for the day, page 36, a cell phone costs $780. The tax rate is 9%. How much tax is charged, and what is the total price? So there's two questions. So first, we're going to set up our ratio. Once again, we're comparing the tax to the total. It tells us the tax rate is 9%. So we know it's going to be 9 out of 100 to represent the tax rate. And the cell phone, the total is 780. And we don't know how much tax is being charged, so we're going to leave that as a variable x for now. Once again, we're going to cross multiply. So 100 times x equals 9 times 780. And I'm just going to simplify. Okay, 100 times x is 100x. And that equals 9 times 780, which is 7,020. Okay, my final step would be divide both sides by 100. And x equals 70.20. And that represented the tax. So the first question it says is how much tax? So we know it's $70.20 for tax. The second question says, what is the total price? So to find the total, I'll do it up here. To find the total, I would have to do 780 for the phone plus $70.20 for tax. And now we get the total of $850.20 total. Okay, so that's our final lesson for today. Thank you for your time. Have a great weekend.